So this is our tech class on internet security. As always, if Mary has your email, you'll get a link to the slides. The slides do have links you can click on, and then you can go get more information. And I try to not overwhelm with slides, having too much information on each individual one, but you can definitely go through it afterwards and learn a lot more. And we'll also ask you to hold your questions until the end if possible, because we have a question section. But if there's a point that I specifically address and you would like some clarity, then please put in the chat window so you can type your question, or we'll also pause at certain times where Mary will turn everybody off of mute, and then we can ask questions that way. And if you have any questions that you think of after the class is done, please let Mary know, and then she can get those to me, and then I will, if it's pertinent to, I think, furthering the entire discussion, I will put it onto the slides at the end so everyone will be able to see them who has access to the slides. And if it's more of like a personal question, I can just respond directly and Mary can send you that. So definitely I'm here to answer questions. And another thing is that what we go over in this class shouldn't be considered the end-all be-all to being safe online. It's a continuing process that requires growth and constant vigilance, but I'm hoping to give you some tips just to make you a little bit safer. So this is just the agenda, kind of so you can get an overview of what we're going to do. We just did the introduction. I'm going to show you some examples of what can happen if you don't have good security practices. I'll give you some metrics. I'll tell you what you can do and leave you with some fun thoughts, which are kind of more current news articles about being secure online. Then we will go over questions, and as always, please don't use TikTok. I have 2 specific links that if you are using TikTok or know someone who uses TikTok, feel free to read them, because in terms of things I hate, TikTok has completely replaced Facebook. So, what can happen if your computer is compromised? I use this example, and I've used this example previously, and I really like this one because the company, after it happened, paid to essentially have an independent security team come in and audit everything, so they have a lot of data on what went wrong. And this is from 2017, so it's not too long ago. And the main takeaways, because I kind of want to blaze through this, the main takeaways are that they had 600 IT staff. So this attack occurred and there were 600 IT staff that were supposedly able to stop things like this from happening. It took 45 seconds to bring down the bank. It took 45 seconds to bring them down, and they lost 10 billion in total with the NotPetya virus. Now, Maersk is one of the companies that got affected, and they were infected by one person in the Ukrainian office of the company had the Ukrainian version of Quicken installed on one computer. So one computer basically brought down this entire company. And the reason it was brought down partially was because the IT staff kept wanting to do security updates and set a schedule for it, but that was not tied to executive bonus metrics. So that process was put on the back burner because everyone wanted to make more money, and basically doing something security based wasn't going to provide the executives any additional funds. So you can definitely look that up if you're interested, but I just wanted to show you that, you being a single person, you can get affected, but the place you work at or a business that you own can have devastating consequences to not taking this seriously enough. This is just a page where it shows some data breaches from 2018. Honestly, I looked at the data breaches from 2019, and there were a lot more companies, but none of them hit the over 1 billion mark. So I decided to keep the 2018 slide in because I like the 1 billion number. And this is kind of just to show you that almost every company you do business with can get affected. Because if Marriott, if Twitter, Under Armour, Facebook, Google, Panera, Facebook, if all of these places can get a breach and have your data stolen, then pretty much any company out there can be a target. So any data you have with a company, you want to make sure that it's as secure as possible, but companies still may get hacked and leak your data. And we'll go over why having your personal data leaked is more of a bad thing than what you may realize.
Tim, forgive me for interrupting, but we had one person who can't see the slides, can't see the images.
Okay. Is that the same with everyone, or is it just because right now I have my screen shared? So
Is anybody
basically,
else having trouble seeing the images? Okay.
No.
Good.
No.
okay.
No, you're not. No, you're not having trouble.
No.
Not having trouble.
Okay, perfect. The recording will go through, so you'll be able to see the images during the recording. Go ahead.
And the other thing without seeing images is possibly you minimized zoom, and there's a blue little square in your taskbar on the bottom that you should be able to click on or hover over, and then you can click on the one that shows an image. That's pretty much the best advice I can give at the moment, or you can try and exit and come back in. So we're going to quickly go over the threat landscape. And this is just an overall distribution. And again, I'm running through these, so definitely save any questions you have on specifics for a little bit later. But this is kind of to show you how these things evolve. So the distribution of malware under Windows in 2015 is different than in 2018. So in 2015, Trojans were at 21, worms at 37, and viruses at 30. In 2018, Trojans are at 62. So basically, Trojans are a lot more popular. And we'll go over what Trojans are in just a little bit. And all of these were blatantly stolen from AV Test, which is an independent IT security institute. So these are the general types of nefariousness that can happen on your computer. There are viruses, which primarily are the bad things. So these damage or corrupt your computer. These can be used to steal information, and basically virus is a catch-all term. What worms do is worms will get into your computer and then spread quickly to all the other computers on the network. So this is more of an issue with businesses. And basically what worms do is they get in, they spread quickly, and then they do what they were programmed to do. So they'll then install a virus or install ransomware. So worms are kind of a means to an end. Trojan is just like what it sounds. It disguises itself as something else, and it will get into your computer, and then it will start collecting data or do something nefarious. And you can think of a Trojan as whenever you go to a website and it says, hey, you need to download this extension to view this content. Well, that extension may be a Trojan and may be stealing your data. What spyware is, kind of in the same vein, is it'll pretend to be something else, but it'll secretly just take all of the data and store it for later. This is one of the things that TikTok is. TikTok, I would consider it to kind of be like spyware. And then ransomware is probably one of the more talked about terms right now. And that's the one where it will lock all of these computers, all of a business's computers. It will encrypt them. And then it will say, pay me money or your data's gone forever. Quick side note. And I, of course, don't encourage any of don't encourage anyone to spend money that they don't have to or anything like that. But ransomware, it succeeds because people get their stuff back once they've paid the ransom. If someone is affecting people with ransomware and they then don't give the data back whenever someone pays the ransom, pretty much no one would pay the ransom. So if you get affected by ransomware, one option is that you could pay and potentially get your information back, your computer back. However, we'll go over how to do a backup, which would basically allow you to not deal with ransomware if you get infected. You would just back up from your previously saved information. I see someone can see the screen but doesn't have audio. Were you able to hear audio previously? And if so, is there like a mute key that got hit or anything like that? Is probably the only thing I can think of at the moment. We're going to go over phishing and spear phishing. This is from KnowBe4. So if any of you has a company or is a part of a company and someone has gotten phished, KnowBe4, not to sound like an advertisement, but KnowBe4 is a company that basically will train people on how to not get caught with phishing attempts. And phishing is essentially just like it sounds like. These people are going fishing for information. So if you get an email that says, add me to your LinkedIn network or add me to your Facebook network, and you click on that link, you may have gotten phished. So basically make sure that what you click on is something that you actually mean to click on. And this is just kind of showing you that LinkedIn is 45% of the phishing emails that KnowBe4 learned about in there. I think this is 2018, quarter 1, 2018 test. So make sure whenever you click on an email, it is something that you should be receiving. And as always, a little tip is if you hover, I know this will be very difficult for you to see, but if you hover over a link, like I have in the bottom left, far in the bottom left of your screen, it will actually tell you where the link is going to. So I can have this link say whatever I want. I could have it say www.amazon.com, and it could be redirecting you if you click on it to www.obviousvirus.com. And if you make sure to hover over the link and check it, you can make sure that it's going to where it says you're going to. So someone occasionally receives emails from a name that he knows, but an unknown email address. They usually want me to click on something. Once in a while, people receive the same thing from me, again with my name, but an unknown email address. Is this spoofing? So yeah, basically, spoofing is pretending to be something you're not. So if I were to spoof someone, if I were to spoof Mary, I would send an email to somebody and make it look like I was sending it from Mary's account. That's what spoofing is. Just in general, getting you to click on something would be phishing. So what can I do? So this is where we're actually going to slow down and take some time and talk stuff over. And the first thing I want to talk about is behavior vulnerabilities. So these are things that you do, and these are things that I do. So examples of bad behavior. Normally, if we were in a more traditional classroom setting, I would ask for examples and then we would go from there. But I'll just pretend that all of you gave amazing answers and they're all on this list. But if you have any additional thoughts, feel free to type them in the chat and Mary will let me know. So, examples of behavior. If you forget to log off to your computer, that's bad. That means anyone who can touch your computer can now get all of your information that's on that computer. Especially in a work environment, This is not great. And one example of this I've seen a lot is if you go to a coffee shop and someone is using a laptop, they will often just leave their laptop on the table and go up to order or get their coffee. Well, someone can quickly go in and capture their information while they're doing that, just because they've forgotten to log off. Poor password management. Anyone who keeps a written down journal of passwords, please change. So there are a couple issues with writing down your passwords. One of them is that you could always lose that book, and then you would have to reset all of your passwords. Another thing is someone can take that book, which is also bad. Another example of poor behavior is if you don't create backups, and we'll go over a backup plan in a little bit. But basically, I'm in the situation where if my phone dies, if I accidentally throw it into the ocean and I lose it forever, I will buy a new phone and all of my data is immediately back on my phone. If my computer fails right after this presentation, because of course I don't want it to fail during, if it fails right after the presentation, I will lose no data because everything is backed up. Another example is if you don't check and apply system and firmware updates. So you know that annoying message that pops up in the bottom left corner of your screen where Windows says, hey, I need to update, please give me a time to restart, and you keep hitting the snooze button and eventually you forget about it. Please try to remember to do the system updates. One of the things that Windows does is they will release patches every week that kind of address the vulnerabilities inherent in their system and vulnerabilities that have been found. So if they find a vulnerability, they fix it, and then you will download it. And if you never hit the restart button on your computer, you don't get that additional protection. In one of the examples of WannaCry, which was a pretty prevalent threat, Microsoft fixed the vulnerability, and then 2 months later, WannaCry came out and affected a ton of computers all over the world. So if people had just updated their system, that vulnerability would have been closed and it wouldn't have been a big deal. Now, the most important one, how can I be sure that the notice comes from Microsoft? So, great question. The notice comes from Microsoft, and you can know that it comes from Microsoft because it's not tied to, like, Microsoft will never send you an email saying, hey, click here to update. It's always within the system. And if you're worried about it, I will quickly show you kind of what it will look like. I can't produce the message, but I'll show you what the security update center looks like on Windows. One sec. So if you go to Windows Update, it'll look a lot like this. And then you will just hit check for updates. And you can get here by pressing the Windows key and then going to settings right here, which is the little gear icon. And I'm up to date, last check today, 120. And of course, I don't have a feature update. And I will then, after this is done, click on the download and install. So all of these updates are done through Windows. And of course, this will happen with a lot of other programs where programs will say, hey, we need to update. Adobe is specifically notorious for needing to be updated due to security concerns. And they will update themselves in the app and basically let you know, hey, you should restart this app because we just downloaded the latest version of it. The
Hey,
most,
Tim,
yep.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. We also had a question about are the recommendations just for updates, or is it ever to push new programs to try to get you to buy things? I'm not sure.
So, I mean, programs will push you to buy things. And so, one example of that is Malwarebytes. So, if I pull up Malwarebytes, so I apologize for probably how small it looks on the screen, but such is life. Malwarebytes is something I recommend, and whenever you install it, you are able to get a free version. So the free version doesn't have some of the more like advanced features, but all I care about are the basic features. And it will constantly say, "Hey, update to premium," before you lose the premium features in your free trial. And you can just hit upgrade to premium, and that will cause you to pay money, or you can just hit the little X and ignore it. So some programs will want you to update so you can spend money, but most of these programs will just update for security reasons. So even though I don't have my Malwarebytes Premium, it will still scan and it will still work on the free version. And it will still update the free version. Okay, so the biggest issue is, and I bolded it and underlined it, is clicking on stuff. That's the main way viruses will get into your computer. That's the main way Trojans, anything bad will happen to your computer, is by you clicking on something. And I don't know how else to say it, but basically if you see a link from somebody and it says like, "Hey, watch this funny video," please hover over the link and make sure that it's going to YouTube or something like that. If you get a email from your bank saying, "Hey, please reset your password," don't click on that link. Go directly to your bank's website, log in, and see if it there will also, if it there tells you that you need to change your password. Just don't click on everything. Another issue is you don't have alerts set up. So one example of this, while not necessarily computer security, I think 2 years ago, I got an alert to my phone saying, "Hey," of course it wasn't this, conversational of a tone, but it said, "Hey, someone just spent $900 on a TV in Massachusetts. Was this you?" And I said no, and then immediately I got a call from Discover, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to call you back," and they're like, "Oh, we get it," because anyone who calls you isn't necessarily from the company they say they're calling from. So I went and called my credit card, which is Discover, and because I had the alert set up, I immediately knew what happened and called and confirmed that it wasn't me who had made that purchase. So if you have alerts set up like that, it will notify you if someone's trying to log into your Gmail account, or it'll notify you whenever someone is trying to log into your Facebook account. And it's always good to have more information. So before we get into different types of attacks, were there any questions on like what viruses are or what Trojans are? Or Mary, do you have anything to add?
Sorry, I was responding to someone. No, I think you've done a great job of, and it's amazing. I get them all the time, even though I've got all sorts of security on my computer. So it's something that you have to be vigilant about.
Oh, yeah. And it's a constant learning experience. I actually probably should have let Malwarebytes run just to show you if I have, because if I have any viruses, what hope does everyone else have? But just to show you some of the different types of things Malwarebytes can pick up. So maybe I'll do that in a little bit. So this is another point in the presentation where I would generally ask for audience to tell me what type of attacks they've heard of, and then we can go over it together. But I'll pretend that you asked me about these specifically. All right, I just got a question. Does Trojan just keep your info for down the road? So that Trojan, yeah, a loose definition of it is a Trojan gets into your system by pretending to be something else. So it'll pretend to be like an advanced search for your browser, and you'll click on it, and then it'll get into your computer that way. It'll pretend to be able to read PDFs. Like if you search for, oh, I don't want to pay for Adobe, but I need a PDF viewer, it'll be a PDF viewer and it will steal your information. So a Trojan is categorized as a Trojan more for how it gets onto your system and less for what it does once it's there. But yeah, Trojans can keep your info for down the road. So different types of attacks. There's a spam bomb. There's a two-factor authentication check attack, which is one of my favorites. There's web defacement. There's the phone mom attack, which I love, and the CEO wants something. I'll just go over a couple. A two-factor authentication attack actually takes advantage of you having two-factor authentication on your account. So try and think to how two-factor authentication works. So for example, if I'm trying to get Mary's credit card information and I want to log into her account, well, I've done my research, I know her email address. So I go to the credit card website, I will type in her email address, and then I will I will hit the button to reset the password. Okay? So basically what happens is Mary will then get an email saying, hey, you've requested a password reset, and that's good. But I will also call Mary and say, hey, I'm with, XYZ credit card. We've noticed some suspicious activity on your account, and we're going to send you a code, and we just want you to read it back to us to verify that it's you. So sure enough, you get a code, your two-factor authentication code, and you're like, okay, well, I just got an email saying someone tried to log in, and I have someone from Discover or on a credit card from the credit card company on the line. They're asking me for this code. Okay, I'll tell them the code. And then they take the code, they say, okay, good, it's you. Now you're going to receive another code. You get another code, and you say, oh, okay. And then you read them that code. Well, what actually just happened is they were sending the two-factor authentication requests to you for you to then read to them so they could get your account. So I may not have explained that the best way, but basically they used two-factor authentication codes to get you to trust them in order for you to give them the code. Web defacement is a little easier to understand. This is where you'll go to a site that looks like Amazon, acts like Amazon, and everything looks exactly like Amazon. But it turns out that it isn't Amazon. They are just pretending to be Amazon, and you check out and they get your credit card information. So always make sure that you are on the site that you think you're on. And I'll show you kind of what this looks like. Unfortunately, it's going to be very small, but so I'm typing in Amazon.com. Now, what happens if I mistype the N and type M? I will go to a website, maybe, that isn't Amazon because I did Amazon.com. Okay, it's not working. That's perfect. So imagine I typed in Amazon.com and I got a website. Now, if I quickly glance at the bar, it looks like I'm on Amazon. And if I look at the screen, it looks like I'm on Amazon, but I'm not on Amazon. So please make sure that whenever you're on our website, that it has the little lock bar to the left of the address bar, and it will show you that it's secure. And you can also check the certificate if you click on it to see that the certificate is valid and issued to the correct website. So basically, just make sure you're on the site you think you're on. And browsers will often give you a pop-up and say, hey, this site looks suspicious. So try and make sure a little bit that you pay attention if your browser says, hey, you should turn back. And I'm not going to go to a website that prompts my browser to say that, but you've probably seen that message before.
There's a question about the difference between the lock and HTTPS.
So it's very similar. So the lock will appear if and only if it's an HTTPS site in general. So if you have the lock, that means it is HTTPS. So yes, one of the security measures websites have is that they are using HTTPS. And your browser will throw up a lot of errors, and it will yell at you if you're on a website that doesn't have HTTPS.
Thank you.
And the phone mom attack, I don't have the exact phone mom attack linked, but it's basically an attack where someone will call and will in one case, they actually will call your mom and say, hey, Tim's been in an accident. I need some information about him so I can, help him out, at the hospital. And your mom is so, overwhelmed with the fact that her son, me, has been in an accident that she'll give that person whatever information they want. And then later out, it turns out that I was not in an accident. But I will open this link so we can view it. It is short and it's fun, so I like it. And this just gives you an example of what people can do, regardless of how secure you are. So I believe I have sound turned on. Mary, please let me know if that is not the case.
Yes, it's on.
So I invited a few of the world's best hackers to try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. And now I'm going to meet them in Las Vegas for DEF CON, the biggest hacker convention of the year. They're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection.
Do you want to do a sample phishing call?
What's phishing?
Phishing is voice elicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Who are you going to call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider and see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm going to spoof from your number, so it's going to look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. my husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry. I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
At gmail.com?
Jessica gets access to my personal email address.
If I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account.
Jess uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry. So there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my password.
Thank you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right, thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was fabulous, Tim.
So if we can unmute people, just because I personally like to talk about that example, just to show you that, yeah, you can do all the right things, but people can still use social engineering to get into your accounts.
Okay, so...
And feel free to replace cell phone with your bank, with anything. Like, if the more information they have about you, and this ties back to social media and things like TikTok. So, for example, some of your security questions may be, what was your mother's maiden name? What street did you grow up on? What was your dog's first name? Well, if I go to Facebook and look at people, I can often find a lot of that information right there. So I can get all that information, so whenever I make that phone call, it's very easy to provide those details.
So Tim, let me interrupt for a second. I'm getting a request to unmute. I have to request people to unmute themselves. I can't do it automatically.
Okay.
So,
well, if anyone wants to talk about that, feel free. I mean, I'm seeing in the chat a lot of wow and oh my goodness.
When they give you options, Tim, for those kinds of questions, how you go if they give you the option for something else, you want to go something extreme out there nobody knows, huh?
Yeah, so that is a great point. And whenever I go over why you should use a password manager, I'll also show you how I do it. But basically, so I feel totally fine saying the city in where I was born is Lexington, Kentucky. And why do I feel secure telling everyone that? Well, one, it's probably not that hard to find. And two, if I ever get a question like that for if I need account access, if I forget my password, and it asks me for what city was I born in, well, it turns out that when I was born in the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I will write that down in my password application, and I will know that if I need to log into my account and I need to use my security question, I'll just give them the fake answer, and I have the fake answer written down.
and why do I doubt that you actually were born in Albuquerque, New Mexico?
I know. I bet you don't even think I was born in Lexington, Kentucky. Who knows? Yeah, and you don't even have to answer those with a city. You can do, a random anything you can think of.
So, Tim, there was a question though, for those kinds of questions, how do you store that information?
I store that in my password database. So just for fun, I'll show you a quick snippet of not what's actually in my password database, but what I use. I use KeyPass, and over here, I just have links to all of my different sections. So like all my photography stuff's here, health, shopping, social media, and whenever I do a new entry, new entry, and I'll do something like in the notes, security question 1. First dog's name, and I will write down Idaho. Completely fake answer. So no one can guess it. Someone can't find it out, and it's just a random thing. So I'll even add numbers. is not a real
Where
answer.
is it that you click to go in there? What are you putting all these categories under?
I'm using the password manager I use is called KeePass, but all password managers will allow you to do something like this. So if I ever need access to my security questions, I'll just open up my password database, and then all my security questions are written down.
And KeyPass is free, correct?
Yes, one of the things you'll learn about me if you haven't learned already is I highly prefer free things. All right, so we'll quickly move on, but we can definitely circle back if someone has any questions in the questions portion.
Okay,
So,
I'm going to mute everyone at this point. So
yep.
if you have a question, unmute yourself. Thanks.
So before I go on, the CEO wants something. There's a question: if I try to get into an account,
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, I had to, when I muted
Yeah.
all, it muted you as well.
Okay, so there was a question of when I get into an account, answer the question correctly, and it doesn't let me in. Does that mean someone may have changed it without my knowledge? It means one of two things. One, it could have been changed, or two, which is more likely, it cares about capitalization, or you wrote down a nickname, or like me, you may have spelled it wrong. So a lot of my security questions and answers before I started using the database, I would spell something wrong, and then I would just use the correct spelling to try and get in. It turns out that was incorrect, and I'd have to go through and change all that stuff again. So the last type of attack we'll go over is the CEO wants something, and this is incredibly prevalent for businesses. And where I work, the townhouse, we get a lot of these. So it basically, the person who is the town administrator his name's Rodney. So we'll get an email saying it's from Rodney that says, "Hey Tim, I'm out of the office, but could you quick, buy an iTunes gift card and give me the code on the back." Stuff like that. So it looks like it's coming from the CEO or the boss, and they'll just ask you for something real quick, and they'll say some reason why they can't do it themselves or they can't answer the phone, and then they expect you just to give that information because you're giving it to the quote-unquote boss. And that's a pretty prevalent one as well. So if we just go to the next one. Software firmware updates. This is kind of just going over what we already talked about. WannaCry ransomware hit more than 300,000 users in more than 150 countries, and the vulnerability it used was patched 2 months prior by Microsoft. So that's one of the reasons why you should always, if you get the update pop-up screen for your computer, you should generally hit the restart button. Antivirus and anti-malware software. So if there's one of the takeaways from this class, if you forget everything else, is to use an antivirus or anti-malware software. There's a slight difference, and it's becoming less and less important as the difference between antivirus and anti-malware. But Malwarebytes, I would consider it an anti-malware software. And basically what anti-malware software is something is already on your computer and you want to get rid of it. You will use anti-malware software. You are using your computer and you don't want to get something to infect it. You use an antivirus software. More and more recently, they've been used interchangeably though. So I use Malwarebytes, and then I've linked a website, and definitely hover over the link and make sure that I, actually sent you to the right place, as we've learned in this class. But avcomparatives.org provides independent testing of AV solutions, and I'll just quickly show you what it looks like because I always get asked, what should I use? So I'll tell you what I use, and then I'll also show you how to read this report that
Okay.
AV Comparatives comes out with.
And there are a couple of questions in the chat as well, if we can circle back for those.
Yeah. And this is specifically for Windows. So Chromebooks and Chrome bases, basically you'll just use browser extensions. Sorry about that. You'll just use browser extensions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. On Mac, you will use both browser extensions if you want, and you can also buy antivirus or use antivirus on your Mac. Viruses are less prevalent for Apple computers, mainly because they don't have the same market share. My favorite anecdote about Apple viruses is the first one I ever saw required you to hit OK 2 times and type in your password for it to get on your computer. So take that with a grain of salt. It's become more advanced, but the first one I ever saw that had a big impact, it required you to click OK to download it, click OK to run it, and type in your administrator password in order to get infected. There's also a question that I'm going to address really quickly before I read this, which is I said that when Microsoft asks you to update, you said we generally should do it. So when don't you? So when don't I? That is a great question. So I always recommend that you eventually do the update, preferably the day after it gets released. I say the day after it gets released because about once a year, Microsoft will release an update that will either brick computers or cause some sort of negative interaction with a specific manufacturer. So for example, we always wait at work one day just to make sure that it doesn't break anything before we apply the update. All right, so again, concise internet security, you will all get this. And on the antivirus/antimalware software page, click on avcomparatives.org. It will take you to their test for February, May of 2020. So they update these all the time. So it's very, they try and keep it up to date. All right, so they go over their methodology, they go over their test procedure, they show you the products that they're testing. And then if we just ignore all this super awesome information that's kind of difficult to read, we can go down to the award levels reached in this real world protection test. So the 3-star is the one you want to get generally, and that's Avast, AVG, Avira, Bitdefender, ESET, Kaspersky, and Microsoft. So one of the questions that just got asked is, do I need to install additional protection over what Windows 10 has built in? And there's kind of an answer right here. Rated in the top section, Microsoft, the built-in, is rated above all of these. So it's rated in the top section. So the built-in antivirus protection that comes with Microsoft is honestly a lot better than it used to be and is perfectly acceptable for people to use. However, it gets updated whenever you hit the update button. So it'll prompt you, hey, can you please restart your computer? We need to apply the security updates. You have to remember to hit that restart button. So personally, I use a combination of Malwarebytes and the built-in Microsoft solution. But if you want to pay for something, these would be the ones that avcomparatives.org recommends. And I apologize, I will make this bigger so you may have a chance of reading it.
And Tim, do you have to turn the Microsoft protection on, or is it automatic?
It's incredibly hard to turn it off.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. And if you want to know how it did, so protection rate, F-Secure, Norton, LifeLock, and Trend Micro blocked everything. And Microsoft blocked 99.7% of the things. So, and another question was, is Kaspersky Russian? Yes. Yes, it is now owned by a company based in Russia. So, yeah. So anyway, I use the Microsoft one, partially because it's free. Will I give you similar info recommendations for Mac, iPad, iOS? Yeah. Yep. So these often will have versions for Mac. So I personally, it doesn't score as high as some of the other ones, but if you're going to pay for something on a Mac, I personally like Bitdefender, mainly because it's not annoying as Norton to me. But it's $30 for 1 year. So they may or may not have a free version, but generally with the ones that are paid, you want to pay for it to get the better protection. But the built-in software for Windows, it works fine for me. And more importantly, or in conjunction with this, we'll go over browser extensions, which in my opinion may actually be more important than the antivirus itself. But to recap, if you take anything away from this slide, if you're on a Windows computer, Malwarebytes, the free version, and Windows, which has it built in, I use both of those and I've been happy for years. If you are on a Mac, you can definitely shop around a little bit more, but I personally like Bitdefender. Sophos is also good. Sophos also has the best marketing campaign out of any antivirus software. So take that as you will. All right, I just want to make sure. Use on an Apple. Yep, went over the Mac stuff. So yeah, and these will also have things you can use for iOS devices. I personally don't use anything besides the built-in Apple protection on my iPhone and iPad. But yep, yes, Mary.
Question about Chromebook.
Yep. So as I said earlier, we'll go over browser extensions, which are pretty much all you need to do with Chromebook. The other thing Chromebooks offer is they completely reset themselves every time you restart. So even if they do get a virus, you just restart the computer, and 7 seconds later, you're fine. And is Glary Utilities a malware protector? It has some aspects of it that can find and remove malware. I just prefer Malwarebytes. And when I post slides, please include recommendations for Mac. Yeah, definitely. However, AV Comparatives is a recommendation for Mac. So, yeah. Sometimes I forget, but in this case, there are recommendations for Mac in AV Comparatives. And what will go below is also for Mac. So, oops, password management. Another really important thing, and another thing you should take away, is if you can remember your password, it may not be secure enough. So some problems with passwords are they can either be too short, you can improperly store them, you will never change them, you make them easy to guess, you use the same password, and you use dates, names, locations. So that kind of goes along with easy to guess. So in the next slide, we'll go over why you shouldn't have short passwords. But the biggest takeaway here is using the same password. So if you remember earlier on, I showed you a slide with a bunch of companies that got hacked, that got their data breached. And one thing to think about is I don't care how strong your password is. If I have the same password to my banking and to my Marriott hotel reports, and Marriott gets hacked, well, congratulations. because they hacked Marriott, they now have my password and my email address. And then they can just plug that information onto a banking website. And because I used the same password, they now have access to my bank. So you want to have separate passwords. So strong. So passwords, you want them to be strong. There's a website called howsecureismypassword.net. Of course, I don't recommend typing your password into anything but the password field that it's supposed to go in, but it's fun to look at this. So basically, if your password is 6 letters long, any 6 letters, it will take a computer 2 seconds to guess it. 8 letters, 5 seconds, 8 letters with an uppercase, 22 minutes, and 8 letters with characters, so special characters like the @ sign or an exclamation mark. It will take a computer 3 hours. So you want your computer both long, your computer password both a decently long and has special characters in it. So we're going to quickly open How Secure Is My Password, and we'll test it out. So let's go with this. So this is my password, bad password 1. And I will enter it and see how good it is. 3,000 years. Does anyone think this is wrong? Well,
Yes.
okay, so one of the issues with this site is it doesn't take into account dictionary words necessarily. So, but just to give you an example, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is 12 characters long, uppercase, lowercase letters, and a number. So if your passwords are 12 to 15 characters long and slightly unique, it will take a very long time for a computer to crack it. Now, however, if I'm a huge Steelers fan, and I don't know, 2019, plug this in, let's refresh. It also says it's a good password, but we know this isn't a good password because people may know I'm a Steelers fan, and the year 2019 may mean something. So you want it to be about this long, but have nothing to do with you.
And I've heard people use random words in sequence. Does that make sense?
Yes, and funny you should mention that.
Oh.
So I will open this up just so it's a little easier to see. But this is a comic. So basically, they're showing that Troubadour, if you put some numbers in there and some symbols, it makes it very hard to remember what the password is. But if you choose 4 random words, it'll be really hard as well for a computer to guess it, and it'll be easy for you to remember. So this is definitely an option. Why would anyone spend lots of time for one person's password unless you're rich and famous? That's a great question. However, if someone is out to get you specifically, they're going to get you. The entire goal, and normally I would tell this joke at the beginning, but I decided not to, so I'll tell it now. So you and your friend are in the woods, and you see a bear, and it looks kind of aggressive. You look down at your friend, and your friend is tying their running shoes on really tight. And you ask your friend, why are you tying your shoes? You're not able to outrun a bear. And the friend says, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. Normally there would be a laugh track, But
Sorry.
we're not in person, so Mary will have to suffice.
I will laugh
And
loudly.
yeah, perfect. So basically, if you look at this, it says it would take 3 days at 1,000 guesses a second to guess it. 3 days. So that's kind of difficult. But if my password was like spring 21, that would take a computer a minute to guess, and they will literally just have they'll, if they find your email address and they steal your email address, they'll just try it. Who cares? They'll try 100,000 accounts at one time, and they don't care if they miss on 99%. It's worth their days of, like, their 1 day of work to get into two people's bank and take, you don't have a lot of money, right? I don't, but they can still take like 10 grand, 10 grand for 1 day. That's not bad. So they're not going to spend lots of time for one person. Yeah, Mary?
I've always wondered about this. For example, substituting zeros for O's or $signs for S's. That's fairly standard. Is that a problem?
So I encourage to add at least one number, primarily because there are a couple. So I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit here, but there's a couple different ways for a computer to guess. The first way, and the quickest way, is called a dictionary attack. And that is where it takes dictionary words and just guesses all of them. So it's not going to guess, a password like IIITHJKL, but it'll guess, Steelers or, Peterborough Town. It'll guess that. So basically, as soon as you add a number in there, a certain subset of password cracking won't work. As soon as you add a character in there, another subset of password cracking won't work. So anything you can do to make it a little bit more difficult for someone to guess your password, for a computer to guess your password, I would recommend you do it. Just because it makes you, the person putting on the running shoes in that scenario. The only secure password is the one you can't remember. My password, and I normally, in class, actually have said it out loud because no one's going to remember it. And I will show you an example of what my password can look like, and I will show you how to do it. So in KeePass, and I see the question about changing password, and I'll get to that in a second. So in KeePass, a lot of password managers have the same functionality. Essentially, whenever you enter a new entry, it will auto-generate a password for you. However, you can ask it to generate a new password. In KeePass, it's by clicking this little key icon. So open password generator. Again, I apologize if this is kind of small on your screen. So length of generated password, 20 characters, uppercase, lowercase digits. Here's where I can check off all the things I want to add. So I will add special characters to it and hit OK. And it will generate a random 20-digit string. Completely random. And now that I have that, I will open up my notepad and paste it in. Okay, now no human is going to guess this, and a computer is going to give up before it guesses it. So this is a secure password. However, there is no way I'm going to remember it, and that's why I use a password manager. So this is kind of what my password looks like. Completely random. And I basically spent time and memorized it. So the question was, what is the standard time frame now for changing your password? That's a fascinating question. There have been a couple changes in that in the methodology behind changing passwords. In prior years, it was up to 4 times a year was recommended. I never really liked that. I generally recommend about once a year. And I would also recommend changing your password immediately if there's been a data breach associated with a service you use. So, for example, whenever Macy's had a data breach, if you had a Macy's account, go and change your password. But it's more important to have a strong password than it is for you to change your password often. Do password managers get hacked? That was the question we just got. And the answer is kind of. So password managers can get hacked. And whenever they're hacked, generally what is taken is the email address of the person who has signed up for it. So a good password manager is encrypted by a key only you have. And if you make that key a strong password, you don't really have to worry because it'll take, 2 trillion years for the computer to crack it. However, if your password manager gets hacked, it's not a good look for the password manager in general. And that's one of the reasons I use KeePass, because KeePass is not stored in a central location in the cloud. It is stored on my computer. So someone would have to hack into my computer initially to get it. And then they would have to then also break the encryption on my password database to get at my passwords, which, again, 2 trillion years. Do I recommend hardware keys? So for those of you who listened and just heard me say hardware keys and have no idea what that means, fear not, they are kind of annoying. So a hardware key is generally you can think of it as a thumb drive that acts kind of like a two-factor authentication. So if I am at a computer and I need to access my bank, I will need to use both my hardware key and my password to get into my bank account. Do I recommend them? If you want to be as secure as possible, I recommend a hardware key. Do I personally use a hardware key? I used it, and then I lost it. And then I bought 2 more, so in case I lost one, I would still have one. And then I lost another one. And then I had to go to the safe deposit box to pick up my copy. And then I was sitting there with the hardware key in my hand thinking, this is a huge pain, and I haven't used it since. So do I use them? No. Do I recommend them? Sure. But there's something you have to remember to keep track of and hold on to. Do I mean I change my password every year? Yeah. So I'll, pick a random date. It may or may not be my birthday. And I will sit down and I'll just go through and change all my passwords, which is easy because I have a password manager. Yeah, Mary?
Oh no, I was thinking about changing all those passwords, but in a password manager in KeePass, that would be very easy to do.
Yeah.
It's all in one place.
Yep. So I have a link for you guys, which of course we will make sure it goes to where I say it does. This is a website called Restore Privacy. It's fairly new, actually. And they have an article from January 23rd, 2020 on password managers. And it just so happens that it echoes my recommendations. So, of course, I'm biased towards it. So I like this website. And if we scroll down, so if you want to read this, I highly recommend it. It'll tell you kind of more reasons for why you should use a password manager. And it goes over what it considers to be the best password managers. There are a lot of password managers you can choose from. The one I use is KeePass. If I wasn't using KeePass, I would use Bitwarden. They're very similar, and pretty much all password managers have very similar look and feel. but there are a lot of options for password managers. Some people really like 1Password. Some people really like Dashlane. Some people really like 1Password or LastPass. Sorry. So this is a site I would recommend people to check out if they want to learn more about password managers. And if you have any questions about them, I can definitely answer them at the end. Yeah, use a password manager. Let's see. You say we should get a hardware key. Is it an actual hold on to key? I want to clarify and say I do not want to give the impression that I'm telling anyone to buy a hardware key. I find them incredibly annoying, difficult, and two-factor authentication, I just use my phone. However, if you want to be as secure as possible, go for a hardware key. And yes, it is a physical, small object you hold on to. Another question is, how long does it take you using KeePass? What does it look like? Do I have to manually log into each site? So this is what KeePass looks like. I'm not going to show you my stuff because that wouldn't be smart. So if I have a new service, I would just hit the add entry button. I would type in the title, Macy's, my username. It has automatically generated a password for me based on what I usually generate my passwords like. I will type in a URL, Macy's.com, and hit OK. So if I want to change it, I would open up the entry by double-clicking on it. I would show hide my password, copy my password, take it out. I like to keep my old passwords. So old 6/23/2020, and then I would have it generate a new password. So now I have a new password. And then I would go to Macy's and just go through the change password option and use the new password. How long does it take me using KeePass? So if I'm logging into a website, I will have KeePass open. I will double click on the URL. And of course, it opens in my other screen. But open. So I'll double click, it'll open it. And then I will just double click on username, which it'll copy if you see on the bottom left or bottom right. This is how long it copies it to my keyboard for. Mainly it does this so I can't accidentally then paste it in something else later. And then I will double click, copy my password, copy paste, and then I'm good to go. Some sites which require a password are insignificant, like subscriptions. Does that password really need to be changed? Is it a real concern? This is definitely something that you can do on a case-by-case basis. I kind of care about things that involve my money, so I make sure to change those every year. And if my password manager stores my passwords only on your PC, not in the cloud, how do I use it from my phone? I don't use it on my phone. I don't buy anything on my phone. I don't use my phone for purchasing anything. I realize that's not something everyone can do, which is why I generally recommend this one. I recommend Bitwarden because it allows it to be on your phone. Bitwarden also has a free version that is good enough for one person. If you want kind of your entire family to use the same account, you would have to pay for it. Do I change my username for additional security? I do not change my username. I just have my username as my email address or my name, and I just change my password.
And
Right.
Tim, this is an unfair question, but
Yep.
have you ever allowed Google to remember your username and password for a website?
Great question. So let's see. If you click on the link that I posted, it goes over why you shouldn't store passwords in your browser. So the bullet points are the security on browsers isn't that great, and your browser kind of can mess it up sometimes. That being said, yes, I do store some of my passwords in my browser, and that's just for ease of use. So, for example, if I log into like the New York Times, I have a login with that. I just have that saved in my password in my in Chrome, because it's just annoying to have to log in every single time. However, like any banking information or anything I pay money to, like Amazon, nope, I do not have that saved in my browser. All right, and I realize this is going long, so I apologize. Implement a backup strategy. Basically, if your computer dies, the question is, how screwed are you? If you lose your computer, how much of an impact will that make on your daily life? If it would make an impact, or if you would lose something like photos that you've been collecting for years, you'll want to implement a backup strategy. And this will also help if you get attacked by ransomware, which will basically encrypt your computer and hold it hostage until you pay them money. So there are two rules, the 3-2-1 rule and the locks principle. I like the 3-2-1 rule. You have 3 copies of your data in 2 different places, and one of those is offsite. So what does that mean? Well, 3 copies of your data, 2 different places, one of them is offsite. So my computer has a copy of my data. My backup NAS, which is network attached storage, is at my apartment. So I have 2 copies of my data, but it's in the same place. So I then also use cloud backup to back up my stuff offsite. So 3 copies, 2 different places, 1 offsite. The backup software I use, we actually have a class specifically on backup software, so I'm not going to get too far into it. But OneDrive is good, Dropbox is good, and Google Drive is good. So emails, I got a question about, so all genealogy emails need to go on an external drive as well as photos already on external. So I use Gmail, so basically all of my emails are already backed up. However, if you are using something like Outlook to get your emails on your computer, there will be an export option where you can export all of your emails in like a OST file, I think, and you can put those on your external hard drive to have them backed up. So browsers. So one of the other takeaways, besides use an antivirus, use a password manager, the third takeaway is install a privacy enhancing browser plugin. I have a link here to a bunch of different extensions that are reviewed, and it will go over in far more detail than what I'm going to go over as to why you should use a browser extension. I will quickly say that the one I recommend, there are a couple options here. The one I use and the one I recommend is uBlock Origin. So this will work on Macs, this will work on Chrome, and this will work on Windows computers. So if I take uBlock Origin, copy it, paste it, uBlock Origin, the first result, chrome.google.com, web store detail uBlock Origin, click, and then I will click the button to add it to my browser. So it'll be a page like this. I will click Add to Brave, and it will ask me if I want to add the extension, and I will add the extension. We have also done a class specifically on browser extensions. So if you want a lot more information about them, definitely feel free to ask Mary for that. And we can also go over that if someone has a question about it. I recommend you block origin. And the reason why you should use a privacy enhancing browser plugin is twofold. One, they block ads, and I find ads annoying, so I block them. And two, whenever your computer views an ad, it had to download a little bit of data in order to display the ad. That tiny little bit of data could include something nefarious. It could include malware. So by blocking the ad, you block the ability to even view something that could cause you to get a virus. So, fun thoughts. I just wanted to kind of make this incredibly topical. And right now, you are hearing about all these riots and all these protests. And you may or may not be actually hearing about how police departments are using, and regardless of how you, which side, if there are sides, which regardless of your thought process, I view this as scary. So what Clearview is during the protests, some people have been rioting and breaking stores, breaking into businesses, stuff like that. If there is a picture of the person who does that, the police department can take that picture from like an uploaded movie or a cell phone video. They will take that image, plug it into Clearview, and learn the person's name and all of their information. And Clearview does this by basically scraping or downloading every single picture that anyone has ever uploaded to a social media site, just like Facebook and just like TikTok. So it takes all that information and basically has as much data as it can find on every single person. And then it allows police to use that to upload a photo and find people. There is a really scary video that you can watch, which demonstrates someone who is, let's say, 35. There's a picture of him, and it finds all of his social media profiles, and it also finds an image from him when he was 14 in an old newspaper. So this software is very impressive in a scary way. And it also shows you, oh, that must be a different section. But this has far more data than the FBI on Americans. So,
Tim, is that available to everyone, just not just the police?
it's only people who pay for it.
Okay.
Which actually, Vicky, thank you so much for the John Oliver link. John Oliver did a very good video about it, and I believe it was in his video where he showed a news clip asking if Clearview was going to be allowed to be given to other governments for them to use. And the CEO didn't say no. So potentially, yeah, I don't know. It's not really on how to secure your computer, but this is more on like how to secure yourself. But yeah, so technology advances at an alarming rate. Just wanted to throw that in the fun thought section. But I fully realize we have gone over time. Back in the day when we did these in person, I would often talk for an hour and 30 minutes. And I'm glad to see that I'm still capable of doing that. But I realize that some of you may be nodding off, and I apologize for the length of this one. But if I'm going to give you 3 takeaways, it's going to be this. So if you're asleep, wake up for a little bit so you can listen to this. 1, use an antivirus and make sure that antivirus is up to date. 2, use a password manager and please don't write it down anywhere. And 3, use a browser extension. I prefer uBlock Origin, and links to all of those are in the presentation, which Mary will email to you if she has your email address. And as always, any questions you have, Mary can unmute you in a little bit. If you have any questions, please ask. I'm here to answer as many as I can. And if you have a question I don't have an answer to, or if it's a really good question in general, I will add it to the slides. And even if you have a comment, I'll add it to the slides so that everyone else can kind of read about it and learn more.
This was an amazingly scary program, Tim. Thank you very much.
It's what I was shooting for. And definitely, if you're okay with swearing, the YouTube link that was linked in the chat, I recommend reading it or watching it if you want to be a little bit scared.
And I will send it in the email out with the slides as well as this recording. Please make sure there are a couple people who I don't recognize. It's either a telephone number or a shortened name, and I'm not sure that I have your email address. So feel free to email me at mhubbard@peterborough.nh.gov to give me your address so I can make sure you get all of this wonderful material. And to further consider security, next week's class is all about what Google might know about you. So I encourage everyone to come and join us for that. Does anybody have any last questions for Tim before we finish up?
So how do you store your password to your password manager so it can be accessed if you die? I love that question. And this is the concise internet security. So I didn't go over that, but concise obviously meant an hour and a half, so I was wrong. So how I personally store my password to my password manager so it can be accessed if I die is I have it engraved on a piece of metal so it won't burn, and I have it in a safety lockbox. But this is something where you can just kind of like give it to your lawyer or put it in a fire retardant safe and just have it written down. This is the one thing you can have written down. Have it in an envelope, a sealed envelope, write down like password. And that way, if like a thief steals it, they're going to see password and their first thought probably isn't, oh, I should probably hack into this person's computer to access their password manager to get all their passwords. Is probably, steal valuables. So that is one thing I'm okay with writing down. However, please don't write it down and say, okay, here is the step-by-step process for how to access. But just so in case you forget it somehow, or if you need it in case of getting hit by a bus is the term we use in the IT field, or at least I do. How would the town get all my passwords that I use for work if I were hit by a bus tomorrow? So I have the password database, the password for it written down somewhere. And if you want to break into the police department and access that, I definitely don't recommend it.
So any last questions before we wrap this up?
Yes, I'd like to follow up on the question about using the password manager and not storing it in the cloud. Because I'm in the process of testing out Bitwarden, and I like it a lot. But I haven't found a way that if I only store it on my PC to be able to access it on my phone. And I don't do banking on the phone, but I still would like to have the convenience ones accessible there for things like newspapers and things like that.
So with Bitwarden, I believe, at least it's the only one I've looked into that has the ability for you to run your own Bitwarden server. So if you want to go that route, one thing you can do is you can basically run their, I'll find it and link it in the thing, but basically they have a package that you can download that allows you to run your own Bitwarden server, and then you can link that, which is on your personal computer, with your phone account.
Okay.
However, they do also offer, and if you want to make it just easier, they do offer the ability for you to store it with them, and then you're able to access it on whatever device you want. And storing your password database with a company isn't as bad as I made it out to be necessarily, because it's still encrypted. Like the password database, even if it gets stolen, it's still encrypted with your master password. So it's still going to take, roughly, depending on your password, 2 trillion years to break into it.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I've been doing right now, but I've been trying to look into a way to have it just on my PC and not have it up there.
Yeah, so
But it's not so awful to have it up there then either.
yeah, Bitwarden does offer the ability to have it on your computer and to share it. But if I were going to use Bitwarden, I would honestly just store it with them, because it's a lot less hassle, and then you don't have to worry about, if you don't have the proper backups for your computer, if your computer dies, what happens, all that fun stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. This is a great program.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. We'll send out the slides and the recording either later today or tomorrow. And we hope to see you next week at 1 o'clock on Tuesday for what Google knows about you. Take care.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, everyone.